A weary waitress watched the billionaire weep in the near-empty airport terminal. His profound sorrow cast a silence over the lonely hours, a silence far heavier than the quiet of the 3 a.m. clock. What if I told you that the most powerful, life-altering moment of kindness I ever witnessed unfolded during the darkest, most desolate hour in an empty travel hub? Patricia wiped down the sticky residue of forgotten soda cups at the small 24-hour coffee shop. Her feet, throbbing with a dull ache, protested every step after yet another grueling 12-hour graveyard shift. The terminal was a ghost town, populated only by the hum of the ventilation system, a few huddled, delayed travelers, and one man slumped alone in the farthest corner booth. He wore a charcoal gray suit, a bespoke garment tailored to perfection, likely costing more than a year of Patricia's salary. Yet his broad shoulders were shuddering with quiet, devastating sobs. His manicured hands trembled as they clutched a small, threadbare teddy bear pressed desperately against his chest. In her 15 years working the overnight shift, Patricia had seen every shade of human despair. Missed connections, career failures, hurried farewells. But she had never seen someone look so utterly shattered. The man's tears fell steadily, staining the Formica tabletop. Something deep inside Patricia, an intuition honed by years of witnessing pain, told her this wasn't simply about a delayed flight or a business loss. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Patricia Martinez had developed an uncanny ability to read the subtle topography of human emotion during the airport's quietest hours. She knew the frantic energy of the ambitious business traveler, the anxious hope of families racing toward reunions, and the bright anticipation of students heading home. But the man in booth 7 was different. His expensive, complicated watch caught the cold fluorescent glare as he slowly, almost reverently, set the teddy bear down. He meticulously smoothed its tiny, faded woolen sweater, handling the toy with the tenderness one reserves for a sacred, irreplaceable memory. Richard Blackwood wasn't supposed to be here. Just 3 hours earlier, he had been standing 20 floors above the city in his polished penthouse office, finalizing quarterly reports that confirmed his technology empire had just officially crossed the billion-dollar valuation mark. His young assistant had offered effusive congratulations. Champagne corks had popped, and the board members had shaken his hand with almost religious fervor. But as the noise faded, all Richard could focus on was the terrifying, echoing silence of the apartment waiting for him. The vast, isolating quiet that had defined his life for the last 7 years, and the single life-defining promise he had failed to keep. The worn teddy bear belonged to his daughter, Lucy. Next week, she would have turned 10 years old. She would have giggled as she blew out the candles, ripped open presents with chaotic excitement, and perhaps, just maybe, asked him to read her favorite bedtime story one last time. Instead, Richard was trapped in a deserted airport terminal at 3 a.m., clutching the only physical remnant he had left of her, struggling to find the internal strength to finally undertake the pilgrimage he had avoided for too long. Patricia observed him from behind the counter, her deeply ingrained motherly instincts surging forward. She had raised 3 children of her own and instantly recognized the signature quality of grief that accompanies the loss of a child. The protective way he held the bear, the specific, careful gesture of smoothing its scruffy fur, the ragged catch in his breath between the silent sobs. She had seen that exact, haunted look reflected in her own mirror during the most agonizing period of her life. The man pulled out his custom-made phone, stared at the screen as if waiting for a ghost to call, then gently laid it back down without completing the motion. Patricia noticed his boarding pass lying next to the teddy bear. The flight to Denver was delayed until morning, but she knew his intended journey extended far beyond a geographical destination. As she habitually refilled the massive coffee brewers and wiped down stainless steel counters, Patricia's gaze repeatedly drifted toward booth 7. The man's quiet weeping had ceased, but he remained utterly motionless, paralyzed by memories that seemed to bear the entire weight of the world. She recognized that posture, that profound stillness. It was the face of someone carrying unbearable, crippling guilt. Patricia could no longer ignore the powerful tug in her heart. She had watched Richard sit, rigid and silent, for nearly an hour, occasionally leaning down to whisper something too soft for human ears to the teddy bear. Her supervisor had long since clocked out, leaving her alone with a handful of passengers stretched out asleep on the vinyl benches. The coffee shop was technically closed, but Patricia started a fresh pot anyway. Something warm, familiar, and comforting. She approached booth 7 softly, carrying 2 large ceramic mugs and the gentlest, most unassuming smile she could summon. "Honey, I hope you don't mind, but you look like you could really use some company and something warm to drink right now," she said softly, placing the coffee down. Richard looked up suddenly, his eyes bloodshot, red-rimmed, and startled by the unexpected intrusion of simple kindness. I'm sorry. I didn't realize the shop was closed," he stammered, immediately starting to gather his expensive belongings. Patricia gently placed her hand on the table, not quite touching his, but close enough to convey genuine comfort and halt his retreat. "Sugar, I've been running these overnight shifts for 15 years, and if there's one unshakable truth I've learned, it's that sometimes people just need a safe, quiet harbor to sit with their thoughts. And this teddy bear here looks mighty important to you." Her voice held no curiosity, no judgment, only the deep, warm understanding of someone who had navigated the bottom of her own valleys of sorrow. Richard's carefully constructed composure shattered again. "Her name was Lucy," he whispered, the sound cracking. "She loved this bear more than anything. Called him Mr. Patches because of the tiny, clumsily sewn hearts on his feet." He tenderly touched the bear's worn, flattened paws. 7 years ago, I was supposed to pick her up from school for her birthday weekend celebration. Instead, I prioritized this monumental business meeting. I convinced myself that it was important, that I was building something monumental for her future. Patricia felt her own eyes burn with sudden tears as she instantly recognized the specific, corrosive tone of self-condemnation in his voice. She had heard it in support groups, seen it in the hollowed faces of parents who carried the heavy anchor of guilt alongside their grief. "What happened, sweetheart?" "Car accident, on the way to my ex-wife's house. Lucy was. She was going to wait for me at her friend's house instead." Richard's hands shook as he pulled out a severely faded, creased photograph tucked securely inside the bear's interior. A beautiful little girl with an infectious gap-toothed smile and bouncing pigtails beamed back at them. "I haven't been back to her grave since the funeral. I couldn't face it, knowing that if I had only kept my promise, if I had chosen her over that meeting, she would still be here. Asterisk, if this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Sometimes the heaviest burdens are the ones we sentence ourselves to carry alone." Patricia quietly slid into the booth across from Richard, her own memories surfacing like strong, familiar waves she had learned to ride but never completely conquer. "I lost my youngest son, Miguel, when he was 8, she said quietly, her voice steady but rich with mutual understanding. "Different circumstances entirely, but the same suffocating weight in your chest that makes it hard to breathe on certain days." Richard looked up, truly seeing her for the first time. This wasn't merely a kind, anonymous stranger. This was someone who intimately understood the bleak landscape of his specific pain. How do you carry it?" he asked, his voice barely a rasp. "Some days are better than others, honey, but I learned something essential that might help you, too." Patricia reached across the table and gently touched the fragile photo of Lucy. Guilt has a way of tricking us into believing that our endless pain somehow honors their memory. As if, by suffering enough, we can somehow compensate for the moments we simply cannot change. But what if that's not what they would want for us? Richard's breathing became ragged and shallow as he allowed her revolutionary words to sink in. For 7 long years, he had deliberately punished himself with relentless work and profound isolation, throwing his entire being into building a massive empire just to avoid the quiet, dangerous moments when Lucy's distant, joyful laughter echoed in his memory. He had successfully built a billion-dollar legacy, but in the process, he had tragically lost his own soul, convincing himself that his success meant nothing without her to share it. "Lucy's school called me that day," Patricia continued, her own voice thick with mounting emotion. "They said she was so unbelievably excited about her birthday weekend with her daddy. She had drawn you a picture of the 2 of you at the zoo, covered in hearts. The teacher said she kept checking the clock, counting down the minutes until you would come get her. The words struck Richard with the force of a physical blow. He doubled over immediately, burying his face in his hands as the monumental weight of 7 years of suppressed, agonizing grief finally found its devastating release. Other passengers stirred distantly, but Patricia leaned forward, creating a protective shield of privacy, while Richard completely fell apart. She knew, from long experience, that sometimes breaking completely open was the only viable starting point for healing. But here's what else that teacher told me, Patricia said softly, waiting until his violent sobs began to quiet to a shuddering silence. Lucy used to tell absolutely everyone about her daddy who built computers that helped sick people get better. She was so proud of you, sugar. Not because of your money or your massive office, but because you helped people. Asterisk, have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments how you found your way through the darkest times. Your story might help someone who needs to hear it tonight. Through his tears, Richard pulled out his phone again and showed Patricia the boarding pass. I'm supposed to fly to Denver this morning. There's a children's hospital there that desperately needs funding for a new pediatric wing. Lucy always wanted to be a doctor. Said she was going to fix everyone's always with her special medicine hugs. His voice cracked painfully on the last words, but something had fundamentally shifted. For the first time in years, he was speaking about Lucy not just with searing pain, but with active, living love. Patricia smiled gently through her own lingering tears. She sounds like she was quite the little healer, and it sounds like her daddy learned something vitally important from her. I've been avoiding this trip for months, kept finding excuses, other critical meetings, anything to postpone it indefinitely. But today, when my board congratulated me on reaching $1 billion in company valuation, all I could truly think of was how hollow and empty it felt. Lucy used to tell me that money was just paper, but hugs were magic. Richard carefully replaced the photo back inside the teddy bear, but this time he held Mr. Patches closer to his heart, not clutching him frantically like a drowning man grasping a lifeline, but embracing him like a beloved, protective memory. What changed today? Patricia asked gently, sensing they were approaching the real breakthrough. I went to clean out my office desk and found Lucy's last drawing, the one from her art class the week before the accident. He paused, studying the worn coffee mug in his hand. It was a picture of me at a hospital, wearing a white coat like a doctor, with a caption in crayon that said, "My daddy helps sick kids get better." She'd been so proud when I told her about my new medical software projects. Patricia felt the palpable shift in the heavy air, the miraculous moment when grief finally transforms from an isolating prison into a connecting, navigable bridge. Sounds like Lucy knew exactly who her daddy really was. Richard, even when he completely forgot for a while. Richard nodded, scrubbing his eyes with the cuff of his expensive jacket. The hardest part is that I know she'd forgive me instantly. Lucy never held grudges. Not even when I worked late or missed a school play. She'd just hug me extra tight and tell me she loved me anyway. His voice gained strength, becoming firm and determined. I think it's time I learned to forgive myself, too. Asterisk, if you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Sometimes the most powerful, lasting healing happens when we find the courage to honor those we've lost by choosing to live the way they would want us to live. As the first ethereal hints of dawn painted the massive airport windows with a soft, promising gold light, Richard stood up from Booth 7 for the first time in hours. He gently tucked Mr. Patches into his carry-on bag, leaving him visible, positioned like a tiny, watchful guardian over the long journey ahead. Patricia had silently refilled their coffee cups 3 times as they spoke through the night, sharing intimate stories of their children, their deepest regrets, and the slow, arduous process of healing their hearts. Patricia, I truly don't know how to thank you, Richard said, his voice no longer broken by sorrow, but filled with quiet, resolute purpose. You didn't have to sit here with a stranger. You certainly didn't have to share your own pain just to help me carry mine. Honey, we're not strangers anymore, and sometimes God puts people exactly where they need to be, exactly when they need to be there. Patricia's smile was warm and deep, the kind that comes from years of learning that love multiplies exponentially when it's shared. even in the darkest, most unexpected hours. Richard reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his sleek business card, scribbling something precise on the back before handing it to her. "That's my personal number. I know this might sound completely insane, but I'm going to endow that entire pediatric wing in Lucy's name. I'd like you to be there for the dedication ceremony if you're willing to come. You helped me remember who I used to be, and more importantly, who Lucy knew I could still become." Patricia looked down at the card, then back up at Richard's face, which was now peaceful in a way that seemed utterly impossible just hours earlier. "I'd be honored, Richard. Lucy would be so proud of her daddy." As Richard gathered his final items and began walking toward his gate, he turned back one last time. "Patricia, what you said about Lucy forgiving me, how do you know that for absolutely sure?" Patricia's eyes twinkled with the quiet wisdom of someone who had walked the treacherous path through darkness and emerged into light. "Because love doesn't actually die, sugar. It just profoundly changes shape. Every time you help a sick child get better, every time you choose compassion and generosity over profit, every single time you remember that hugs are magic. That's Lucy still teaching you how to be the beautiful daddy she always knew you were." Richard nodded slowly, a profound understanding flooding his face like the sunrise. He walked toward his flight with steps that seemed physically lighter, carrying Mr. Patches and a heart that had finally learned the crucial difference between honoring memory through continuous suffering and honoring it through active, transformative love. 6 months later, the Lucy Blackwood Pediatric Wing opened its doors, featuring a small, sunlit cafe inside. It was managed and run by a woman named Patricia, who served strong coffee and gentle comfort to families navigating their most difficult hours. Above the main entrance, a simple bronze plaque read, "Where love changes shape, it never dies." Asterisk, if you enjoyed the story, please remember to leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of healing and hope. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most profound acts of kindness happen in the quietest moments between strangers who become family when love lights the way.